Hey everybody, welcome to We've Got Ward, a Doof Media podcast series where we expertly dissect and discuss Ward, Wildbow's return to the world of parahumans. My name is Matt Freeman, and this is my co-host, Scott Daly.
Buh.
God, man, not again.
Blurble.
Every time, I have to reset the thing, stick this thing into his brain. There. My co-host, Scott Daly.
This is the weekly podcast where Matt and I eagerly dive into Wildbow's world of heart band-aids, Endbringer Jesus, and alien-based death powers as we analyze and interpret this ongoing web serial. This week, we finally wrap up Arc 19 Infrared with chapters 19.g and 19.z. It's a double lewd week, Matt, as we first step into the head of Taylor Swift's biggest fan, Brian, who does what no one else in this entire book has successfully been able to do, get through to Kenzie. Then we switch over to the Simurgh as she reverse cause and effect chains her way through a few different perspectives. The overall point is that the entire future of the world rests in the hands of Chris. And the Simurgh has made sure that he's going to turn those hands into monster wings and fly away, dooming us all. It's fucking great. It's great.
It's a deep cut there, Scott.
Matt, what did you think of these two chapters?
I mean, I love them. I always feel like it's a delightful treat when we get double interludes, even though I love Victoria so much. Like it sounds like a backhanded thing to say, but just the Wildbow interludes are always just like exceptionally fun. Mm-hmm. And Brian, miss the guy, love him. This is a treat I didn't know that I needed. And of course, what seems to my eyes to be a Simurgh interlude is always foreboding as hell. So
yeah, it is. There's a lot of foreboding in here, but and we're going to talk about this a lot, but I left this week's chapters with a sense of absurd optimism. And you could call me naive, and that would be fair. But you know what? I'm going to embrace it, because what's the worst that can happen? You're just horribly disappointed.
Well, I mean, if you're doubtful, then the only benefits that you get are the benefits of being.
I see what you're trying to do here, and you're not saying it correctly.
Okay. Well, anyway. Okay.
Let's talk about things.
Let's move on. Yeah. So the fan art contest is still going on, everybody. It closes up March 4th, and the theme is acceptance. Please send us your acceptance themed parahumans or pact themed fan art by March 4th.
Yeah, and that's a week from the day this episode releases. So you have exactly 1 week from right now to get that in. So plenty of time still. Can't wait to see. But we've got a couple in already, and they're very, very good.
Yeah.
Very good.
All right, let's get into these chapters. 19.g begins. And can I just say that I didn't realize how much I wanted a Brian interlude?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because during our post-show conversation we had last week, we streamed the show live with some of our patrons, and we always kind of chat with them as we finish up the episode while I'm doing the editing. But we were talking a lot about Brian last week, and I was kind of talking about how Brian didn't work for me as well as some of the other characters in Worm, and how I felt kind of bad about, how much I just kind of dismissed him because he's a good dude with a sad story, and I was just really dismissive of him in that book, at least relative to some of the other characters. And then I boot up the webpage on Sunday afternoon, and who is it? But it's the Brian interlude. And I'm like, great, I have another chance. I have another opportunity with this character.
Yeah, so now we'll do right by him, I hope.
Yeah. I mean, I think you can officially put me in the absolutely love Brian category for forever now.
Yeah.
This if I was on the fence about Brian, this chapter seals it.
I think I've always liked Brian. I just he's sort of the Ron Weasley of the group, where he's fine, right? But like you're not excited about him.
I guess that means, are you talking about book Ron Weasley or movie Ron Weasley? Because they did movie Ron Weasley dirty. Book Ron Weasley's way better.
I guess I'm talking about book Ron Weasley. I don't know. This is going in a direction that I don't want to be held responsible for. So Brian, the character in this story, is cleaning himself up in the washroom. And as he's doing so, his mind is picking out all these details of his surroundings and his thoughts and his person that will, I think, structure the tone and the main ideas of the chapter.
Yeah.
He thinks about how he used to be mostly normal and only sometimes a cape, and now it's the reverse. And as he goes about things, his actions are very deliberate, and he's always uncomfortably aware of his surroundings.
Yeah. I really love this opening, Matt. I love the whole 75-25 civilian cape thing that Brian demonstrates is the paradigm of his old life and how that has almost entirely reversed here, and that his skull face is the perfect symbol of that reversal. I like this just reminded me, and I want to go on a little tangent here about how much the idea of cape life balance is presented all throughout the story through multiple lenses. I mean, the primary lens is through Victoria and her kind of wrestling with this idea of this like original argument she had with Jessica at the very beginning of the story, which is like how much of your life should be committed to the cape stuff, how much should not be. And Victoria's like basic belief that it can't not be, like it has to be a big part of it. It's just the way it works. But we've seen her become more and more extreme in that regard as the book has gone on. But now we have the flock, and then specifically Brian in the flock, that is almost that idea made literal, right? It's like they are reborn with the cape stuff put to the surface. Like that becomes who they are almost entirely. And then I think just like the Titans as well represent that. Like the cape part of them got so big that they're literally giant people now with a little tiny human bit left in there. So, I mean, it's just like over and over again, we've seen this idea, this wrestle between parahuman and human in these characters through all different ways. There's different ways the book deals with this central concept.
I love that idea of the Titans being somebody who the Cape side has taken over and they're giants. That's a cool it's a cool idea.
Yeah. But to get back on topic, I love Brian's attention to the temperature of this room. I love that. Like he calls the room inoffensively warm. It's just, or inoffensively room temperature rather, but the ice cold water hitting him on the face is still a relief to him, even though it's not really that hot here. And it's kind of like he's living in this like just kind of plain, like not anything's wrong existence, but he needs the shock of the coldness to like bring him out of just like moderateness, right? Like it's really interesting, and there's so many details here. His chemically textured curls, the cut on his lip, the cards he keeps in his belt that basically remind him of who he is, his non-cape identity he keeps on him at all times as like an anchor to who he is. It's just rich with this wonderful detail that I really, really liked.
Yeah, he's so uncomfortable and agitated at all times, and he talks about like the dam building and everything. Like he's actually like annoyed. He's like annoyed at how normal it is. Even it's a really interesting kind of framing for this character where you like even just reading the text, you're like, he's so on edge about everything. If there's nothing to be on edge about, he finds something to be on edge about.
Yeah.
So I like this I really love this idea that he's basically always got his darkness on full blast, at least when he's alone. Like he's washing up, but the entire room is flooded with his darkness, and he has to actively dissipate it just to observe like what the effect of natural light will be on his skin.
Yeah, I mean, it really sells just how uncomfortable he is, right? That like this is something he just does constantly now. He's like needs to be constantly shrouded in this darkness. I think one of the things he says that he repeats multiple times throughout this chapter is he just has this never-ending feeling like he just got back from a battlefield. No matter what he was doing last, he always has this perpetual like tense, like almost like the adrenaline is still pumping a little bit because I just got finished a huge destructive battle, and that's just the constant feeling. So it kind of makes sense that his power being almost constantly on like links to that.
Yeah, but I think it's fascinating because it's not something that he's doing I don't want to say on purpose, because clearly he knows he's doing it, but like he doesn't think of it. He doesn't think anything wrong with it, right? He's why shouldn't my entire environment be? He's hiding all the time, basically by default. Now it's kind of like Taylor with her bugs. He's by default completely hiding, and there's a few times in this chapter, I think, where he will like sort of notice that someone is there and then dismiss the darkness so they can see. But like by default, he's just covering everything in darkness.
Yeah, I mean, that's the great thing about this point of view is that, you know, except for this moment and then other moments where he's specifically dismissing it to help someone else, he seems entirely just unaware that the darkness is there because he can see through it and it's always there. So like his point of view doesn't point out the darkness unless it's specifically to help someone else.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's really, I mean, it's like, it's really cool that the detail in there, I just really like it.
Yeah. So then he goes and he runs into Lisa, and Lisa says that she doesn't like Breakthrough's plan, which I think is a nice little bit of tension elevation that will lead into the next chapter.
Yeah, it's like, it's really great because when Lisa says she doesn't like something, it's not just her being contrarian, right? I mean, she's probably got some Shard shenanigan opinion feeding that. Like, if Tattletale came to us and said, I love this plan, it's a great plan, you'd probably feel a little more secure in the plan, right? I think maybe just a little bit. And so this is the exact opposite of that.
Right. I mean, she knows things. She's demonstrated a kind of insight into everything that's going on where I would trust her gut or her information on stuff like this.
Yeah.
But of course, we don't learn why she doesn't like their plan. Like she doesn't say like, I don't like it because they're doing this and that's going to mess up with, you know, in this predictable way. Brian doesn't get to know that information and thus neither do we.
Yeah.
So Lisa then sends Brian in to deal with Kinsey. And we're just going to talk about this forever because this is just a perfectly set up situation, isn't it?
Yep.
The text is very subtle about pointing out how perfect it is, but I think it is all in there in the text. So we have Brian. Brian's terrified of young girl tinkers with cheerful affects. It doesn't appear to be a fear that has been diluted by time or worked out by confronting it. Mm-hmm. And now Brian has to go talk to her, a young tinker. And then on the flip side, I think Kinsey's never gotten over alienating her dad's and likely misses having that particular flavor of like strong, dependable presence in her life. And she also has very fresh pain surrounding death and loss. And Brian just has this very unique perspective from which to talk on that topic. So overall, just the two of them talking, it's just such a well put together idea.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like a geniusly constructed idea. Like just from a storytelling perspective, doing this is just brilliant. Like I wonder, it's so genius. I wonder if it was planned from the beginning or just kind of inadvertently backed into. Like, you know, you can imagine a construction of this chapter is like, all right, so we've decided that we're going to do a Kenzie focused interlude. We're going to do it from Imp's perspective. Imp's going to be the point of view. And if I'm doing an Imp interlude, I might as well like bring Brian back into it. And then you go, oh shit, that means Brian and Kenzie. Yes. Like you wonder, like, it's one of those things that you wonder the writing, method here, where like, are things just lining up perfectly, or is it just like you've set characters up so much that you, like we talked about this idea a lot, right? That you have so many balls in the air, you can like choose what to do with where. Yeah. And it's just like we brought Brian back into the story because it made sense to bring Brian back into the story in an interlude, but then suddenly it also makes sense to have Brian be the one that deals with Kenzie.
Yeah. Right. I mean, I agree in the sense that it feels so perfect that it feels like it was set up intentionally, but I also would not be surprised to learn that it was just serendipitous. Either like it doesn't matter is the fun thing. Either way, we get to enjoy this delightful thing. Mm-hmm. Before he goes in there, though, Aisha is a shit to him about being good with kids, and the insinuation that he might actually have been good with kids and then lost that part of himself almost makes him panic. Which kind of sucks. But of course we can't be too mad at Aisha because I have a strong suspicion that she or Lisa or both of them or whatever know exactly what's going to happen when Gru goes in there.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Like, we just noted how good of an idea this comes from like a meta narrative perspective, but surely our characters are aware of those connotations as well. They're not stupid. Like, Lisa isn't stupid. Aisha isn't stupid. They know that there is a line you can easily draw between Riley and Kenzie. And maybe they suspect here that not only will this Brian be the perfect person to deal with Kenzie in this way, but perhaps Kenzie is the perfect person to help Brian deal with some of his shit as well. So it's this. It adds to the brilliance of this whole scenario, where it makes sense on a Watsonian level, but also a Doylistic level, right? It's both.
Yeah,
I love it.
Yeah, and I agree. And now let's get into all the details of that.
Yeah.
So again, before he goes in there, Darlene runs into him, and Darlene she's being very hesitant and unsure of herself, and Brian is torn between the impulse to be brusque and efficient, which reminds him of his dad and is how he's been behaving lately, versus the desire to be softer, which he finds difficult and unnatural.
Yeah, this interaction, I love it so much. I wanted to talk about it, so I just pulled it all, and I'm not going to read it all. But the thing I really like about this is the first thing he does when he sees Darlene and she starts to ask the question, and there's a pause here, Brian starts describing what Darlene looks like. 12 or so, Darlene had black hair that didn't go below her chin, tucked behind her ears, and bold red lipstick that didn't suit a kid her age. She wore a costume with a knee-length dress built in and a shiny black cloth overlain with silver tracery. Her tights were silver with black tracery. Now, we, the reader, already know what Darlene looks like. We've seen her for many, 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 many chapters. And I think this is important. Like, we're updating the reader to what Darlene looks like. But I don't think this is just like Darlene being described so we know, right? This is specifically the text describing Darlene for the sake of the point of view character, and almost only the point of view character. And I think that's really fascinating, because it means like we're getting into Brian's state of mind and understanding how Brian is processing things through the use of this description. So like, it is not just Wildbow saying, did you need to remember what Darlene looked like? No, we know what she looks like. We know her general fashion style, but it still has it here. And like, it's this kind of contradiction here he's seeing between her as this young girl, but also someone who dresses much older than they are. And I mean, it's a way that he's specifically drawing a line here to Imp, to his sister, and why he kind of is able to kind of get things together enough to wait for her to answer, instead of like being the gruff impulse like person he was when he was on the flock. Yeah.
I think that's great. It is being, the connection is being made directly, right? And he is he's almost sort of taking like another stab at how he feels like he failed to be a good big brother. I think partly with Darlene here, and also sort of partly with Kinsey, because he clearly feels like he failed as a brother, or at least that seems to be the case to me anyway. I mean, he thinks later about how the last thing he thought about before he died was Aisha, and which is just heartbreaking to me.
Yeah.
But I see that being the connection here specifically.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I just like it just I was really into this idea that, oh, we're doing like a full description of a character that's been in the story for literally months.
Yeah. Right.
And
it's
that
also
really
interesting
jumped out to me.
I think it's also interesting because he knew her when she was 2 years younger, basically.
Yeah, that's true.
And now she looks different, and she is different, and he's still coming to grips with that. So,
yeah.
So the reason why Darlene is talking to him is because she wants to disconnect from Kinsey, and Brian is like, no, because he wants backup. And I think that's such a great subtle indicator of how freaked out about this he actually is.
Yeah, I mean, I know that there are powers involved and stuff, and that all distorts like the power balance of being a person in this world, especially how us normal humans see it. But there is something like very powerful in the visualization of this like large, fit adult man with a fucking skull on his face. I know he has it covered. I know he has it covered with makeup right now, but it's there. And he has this badass superpowered darkness. And this idea of him being so terrified of this interaction that he wants to lean on this young child despite her asking if she can get away from this thing, that he's so scared that he needs to lean on this child. Even after she says, please don't include me. I mean, I think that's such a powerful image. Like, yes, there are superpowers. Things are different. Power dynamics are messed up. But for us, the reader, like that image is just very, it really sends that message, I think.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. This just actually kind of struck me, but the idea that having a skull on his face is like the most sadistic possible thing, because it's not just yes, he did used to wear a skull mask, and so it's a fun inversion of like, okay, he used to have a skull mask, now he permanently has a skull on his face, but a skull is a clear symbol of death.
Yeah.
And it's basically like a mark of death, of having been dead, and he's, especially because he's this person who has this terrible PTSD surrounding like near death experience that he had. It's just such a it's worse. It's worse than it would be if it was just like it's bad in two different ways, I guess is what I'm saying.
No, I totally that's a great thing to call out. Yeah, I mean, imagine having to look in the mirror and not only are you reminded of the fact that you are no longer Brian, you are just Gru, but also reminded of the fact that, hey, remember that time when you died and now you're back? Yeah,
exactly. Great. Yeah. So I love that. So, you know, we already mentioned that that he's been using his power all the time. But when he comes into the room where Kenzie is, it says, what had been white walls, floor, and ceiling became black smoke, heavy and slow moving. He left apertures for the lights.
Yeah, I mean, I love this. I mean, in the story, he's using his power here to prevent her from like doing tinkery shenanigans, right? But I do love that, like, it's just like we're approaching this conversation that we've built up as it's going to be this very difficult, scary conversation, and the white walls and floors become black and heavy, and it's just a really way of setting the mood, really great way of setting the mood.
Right, and the thing is, I immediately imagine what this experience is like for Kenzie, because for her, she doesn't know this guy, and then he comes in, and like she's smiling through the first part of this interaction when he comes in, which means she's upset and afraid.
Yeah,
I mean, she's already been upset, but now she's got this large man who's cornered her in here and then turned her room into this little nightmare zone.
Yeah.
It's gotta be way scarier for her. Right. And it doesn't even occur to him how terrifying he must seem.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I mean, I love it because like he catches her attempting to pick the lock too. So it's not only is he barging in here with smoke ready to talk to her, but like the connotation here, at least from her mind, is I was caught doing something I'm not supposed to do, and now I'm in super, super trouble. And here's skull-faced McSmoke Man to come to punish me. And like, I think it really enhances the stakes here. I mean, like, it also, to me, the fact that she was picking the lock also kind of sets the stage for how this is going to go from Brian's side as well, because it's clear here that Kenzie, even though she was just knocked out because she was going like real bad, doesn't seem like she's taken the time to realize, okay, that was bad, and I need to be better about that. She's just kind of saying, okay, I just gotta get out of here, and I'll fix it that way.
Right. Yeah. I feel like her mentality about this is probably that he's here to like intimidate and guard her, and the last thing that she would expect would be a conversation.
Right.
Right. And it's like, it's interesting because I love the way it goes, because you can imagine it going badly, kind of easily. Like it doesn't start off going great. Like at first, no. She keeps requesting that she be allowed to leave and help, and he just keeps stonewalling her. But he's stonewalling her with this like sort of measured patience and just like very reasonable assurances. Like he's not just being like, no. He's being like, look, you've already done a lot for your team, and now you just need to trust your team. And he successfully talks her down, actually. And then relatively quickly, he sits down, and then he kind of starts opening up to her, and you really get that he needs this too.
Yeah.
He starts talking about Cozen, starts talking about the things about her that he liked and remembered fondly. And then he tells Kinsey that when the world ended, none of that mattered. It didn't matter that he had someone that he cared about and loved in his life. He didn't even think about Taylor or Cozen at all. He was basically just alone.
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right here. This whole conversation, from how it starts to how it ends, is just fantastic. And before we really dive into that stuff that you just talked about, I kind of want to just like generally talk about the scene, and maybe it's because we've been watching a lot of Fincher movies for the Doofcast, but I see this as kind of like a very classic Fincher conversation scene, in just like the way it's doled out, the way it's measured, the way it kind of ramps up and then kind of curves and veers, and like there are separate climaxes within the conversation where you feel like things are about to get really bad, and then there's a little breakthrough, and then we kind of let the tension die down but then ramp it up again. I don't know, like this is just like, to me, a masterwork of managing tension.
I love the comparison to a Fincher scene, but yeah, I mean, it's a long conversation. There's even gaps in it, which I think is a really fun technique. It goes all over the place, but it doesn't feel long. It feels like you're riveted the whole time. I really think it's cool.
Yeah. To get to your point though, Kenzie is basically saying that she needs to go out there right now, because she needs to help. And even if she can't help, she needs to be around her people, because she's so tired of being alone. And if the world is going to end, she wants to have someone to hug and wants someone to be with when the world is ending. And Brian is like, well, I did. And let me tell you, she was great, but turns out dying still sucks.
Yeah.
No matter if you have a person with you or not. And people don't necessarily make that okay. And I think like this is great because it's such a radical idea to Kenzie, because she places such a premium on having people and having these connections that she's willing to go too far to maintain them. And Brian is just like, hey, guess what, Kenzie? Sometimes it doesn't help too much. And not to get too personal with me, but this really jumped out of an anecdote in my life. Like, we were talking last week about how one of my greatest fears as a parent is that I say something that my kid remembers forever. Well, guess what, Matt? One time my dad said something to me and I remember it forever. And I think I might have talked about this on the show before. I don't remember. But my dad and I just one time were having this conversation about like the fact that he's alone a lot due to his job. He's a pilot, so his job is flying out and just hanging out in a hotel alone a lot. And he said to me something to the effect of, you know, Scott, no matter what you do in your life, no matter how outgoing you are, how successful you are, no matter how great your relationships and marriages are, there are still going to be times in your life that you're just going to find yourself totally alone. And you need to be able to deal with those moments and be okay with them. And that, for whatever reason, has stuck in my head forever. I will never forget that. Especially there were times in my life that I was totally alone, like after a relationship or like when I was traveling for work or stuff like that, where you're just kind of miserable and you're all by yourself. And my point here is that not that that's like a super healthy attitude to have all the time. My father, bless him, is a super pessimistic person sometimes, and I think so is Brian. But I do think there's wisdom to be had in this idea that connections are important. Having people around you are important. That's something this book has said over and over and over again. The connections we have with people are some of the most important things that can help us get through some of the most important moments of our life. But if you value the idea of connection so much that you are willing to do whatever it takes to hold on to it, that is just as destructive as not having the connection at all, as being alone. Sometimes connections are broken. Sometimes they fade away. Sometimes people leave us. Sometimes they die. Sometimes they just don't want to be around us anymore. That happens. And we don't have control over it all the time. And we need to be okay with that happening. We need to accept that sometimes our connections fail. And that is the one thing that Kenzie cannot do or has not been able to do. And Brian is saying here, like, look, you have to be able to do that. You have to be able to let those things go sometimes, because at the end of the day, at the end of your life, at the end of the world, the things that make a difference are going to be the time you spent with those connections, not that you had them right there with you at the end. Yeah,
I love it. I love that. This is going to sound pessimistic, but have you ever heard the phrase, everyone dies alone?
Yeah.
I just Googled where that's from and I can't actually find it. It's like a mystery. But I think that pretty much captures the sentiment that like no matter what you do, it all kind of ends the same for everybody. And that's not, I don't think it's meant to be hopeless. It's just meant to be like, look, like it's kind of a you can't take it with you type of sentiment more.
Right, yeah.
It's like it's speaking in terms of acceptance. You have to accept that no matter how much you love these people and how much you want them to be around you all the time, you have to accept that they're not going to be 100% guaranteed. They're not going to be.
Right,
And
right.
This isn't the maybe. And this is the main thing Kenzie's always struggled with is her kind of attachment issue. And this is really what she has needed to hear, I think, for some time.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, I think it's such a simple but powerful thing. And I think, we romanticize the idea of like being surrounded by loved ones at the end of your life. Look, that's the way I want to go. But also, at the end of the day, you're still dying. Like,
right.
Does it matter if I have every single friend I've ever had holding my hands or with their hands on my shoulders as I pass away? Or does it matter that I can look at the end of my life and be like, that person and I didn't stay friends forever, or I lost that person in my 20s, they died. Does it matter more that you can look back at those moments and say, hey, the moments I had there were pretty great. They're pretty great. And it's okay that I didn't have it forever, but because it gave me what I needed in the moment. And I think that's what Brian's saying here. And I don't know, there's something that just speaks to me like very specifically. I think it has probably to do with the conversation my dad and I had all those years ago, but that is something that speaks very personally to me. And I think it's so thematically fitting for everything we've been talking about with Kenzie, this whole story.
Yeah. Well, I think everyone can struggle with this idea. I mean, I think everyone I feel like everybody struggles with like losing friends over time and not due to, death. And I mean, unless unless there's a tragedy, which of course does happen. Yeah. But just due to time and distance and convenience, like it's very hard. But I think like a healthy attitude about it is just to be like, well, we had really good times when we were together, and I can remember those fondly, and I'm not going to flagellate myself over the fact that, I mean, we're not in contact anymore or whatever.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that segues perfectly. I mean, it's designed to segue perfectly into this next bit where he then kind of steps outside and tells Darlene that she can cut the connection. Partly because he started to relax and he doesn't feel like he needs the backup, but I think also because maybe on some level he detects that Kenzie doesn't need the connection. She won't freak out now because Darlene disconnects with her.
Yeah. I mean, this whole speech about how sometimes you have to be willing to let the connections go, right. And then we immediately go, okay, Darlene, break the connection. Right. And you're going to have to, Kenzie, deal with that. And she's not happy about it, but she doesn't like immediately lose it. So good.
Yeah. I love how Darlene's power serves as this great metaphor for, direct connection, which kind of makes sense that Kenzie has like embraced it so much. And she's like, oh, good. Yeah. This is great. We can always 100% of the time be connected. And Darlene's like, no, that's super not fun for me, but also it's hard to say no to that kind of intensity.
Yeah, I mean, I think we said this when Kenzie was first like linking up with these kids. We were like, wow, that is both the perfect and the worst possible person for Kenzie to be really close friends with.
Yeah.
Because it feeds into her worst tendencies. But also like it's both, right? Because it feeds into her worst tendencies, but also might be the only person that can like give her enough comfort to help her get to a point where she can change and get over it. That obviously isn't what ended up happening, but it could have been both at the same time.
Yeah. So then he goes back inside and Darlene gives him a heart covered Band-Aid, and then he uses that Band-Aid to cover the scar on Kenzie's face that she's been kind of self-consciously hiding. And now they're both covering up their scars.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't talk about that as the conversation started, but I just love that Brian like immediately noticed Kenzie's scar. Like he walks in the room and she's like doing this thing where her hand is by her mouth and she's kind of covering up the place on her face where the scar is. And I know that like Kenzie has been perpetually hiding this thing basically the entire book. Like anytime she had any tech on her at all, she was using that tech to cover up the scar. And this is one of only a rare number of times that her tech has been stripped away from her enough that she can't hide it. But the fact that he notices it right away and notices that she's hiding it is so wonderful. Like I'm just like, oh, dude, you are good with kids. Look at you go. And I love that Brian's point of view emphasizes how small it is. Like this scar has metaphorically and almost literally ruled so much of Kenzie's life. Like this is like the original wound that that has carried into the person that she continued to become. And then Brian looks at it and it's like, oh, it's this small little barely visible scar. And he just very easily like gets a Band-Aid to cover it up. And it's just like, I don't know, it's just like the perfect, it has so much emotional weight to it. But at the end of the day, it's just a little scar. And look, we can just, it's not that hard to cover up. It's not that hard. I don't know. It's beautiful.
Right. And there's also, I mean, another thing that makes it just feel so set up, whether or not it is that they both have these things on their face that they're self-conscious about. And they kind of, by being there for each other, they're almost giving each other a kind of permission to feel that way about that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it ties into what they talk about next about like you choosing to be the person you want to be. Brian, his face has a skull on it, but he's choosing to cover that with makeup. He's choosing to say, I want the person I want to send out to the world is Brian, not Gru. He's making that choice. And she can choose to be a person that covers up her scars with love because it's a heart Band-Aid.
Yeah. It's the heart-shaped pupil theme, right? It's awesome. It's great. And it's from the Heartbroken. And
Yep.
I love it. So then next I talk about whether Kenzie would get into heaven, which is just heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And then after that, Brian explains that you can't change people, which is another thing Kenzie's needed to hear for a long time. Scott, people should have been having these conversations with Kenzie.
Yeah, I agree. But like to be as charitable as possible to all these people, I think they've tried. Like I do think Victoria has tried to have maybe not this exact conversation, but a conversation like this. I think Swansong has probably tried as well. It's just really hard, and this is something that Kenzie has had a really hard time accepting. And it reminds me of last week's conversation where we saw, as disgusting and disappointing as it was that Amy needed to destroy another life before she was able to hit rock bottom. Maybe Kenzie needed to be here in this moment and have it be this person who finally lays this thing out to her in this way to get her to finally understand it. So I mean, like, yes, I think Victoria, I think Breakthrough have played into some of Kenzie's absolute worst tendencies and have not dealt with her in some of the best ways multiple times throughout this book. I totally think that's true. But I also think like she had to get here before there was hope to get better. Yeah,
I think that's true. I think fundamentally people have to be open to change or looking to change and receptive to a message like this, especially when it's so sort of cutting to the quick of who they are and how they are in the world. And in this moment, she's probably at peak, like, hopelessness and feeling like her strategies are just not working for her anymore and breakdown. And so she might actually be in a place where she can take this to heart, like you said. So yeah, there's definitely some exasperation that I feel, but I also completely agree that even if Victoria or whoever had this conversation, she'd just be like, yeah, that makes sense. And then just go on being who she is.
Sure. I really love how the text is written here, though. You can't change other people. The heartbroken couldn't do a thing to make their father less of a monster. I couldn't do anything to change Skitter. Skitter couldn't change Rachel. Lookout rose up, propping herself up. You just said before that she did. You change yourself, set your boundaries, decide what you'll do and who you'll be to others, but you can't change them. And I love that as just like, that's like a shout out to Rachel herself. We're like, yeah, I mean, it is absolutely 100% true that Taylor being there for her helped Rachel along on her journey. But Rachel would not have made that change if she didn't want to make that change. And so, like, give Rachel all the credit in the world. She's this way because of herself, because she decided that she wanted to change. She wanted to be that person. And then he says, decide who you want to be, refine that person, study the skills you'll need, go to the gym, work out. And I think we have to remember, we've been talking very specifically in the angle of Kenzie this whole time, that this is a conversation for Kenzie. But I think the brilliance of this is that Brian is talking to himself at the same time. He's saying these things to reinforce it in himself and these feelings he's had. Like we met him as this guy who was very uncomfortable in his surroundings, who clearly wasn't sure who he was and what he wanted to be and how he interacts with people. He's uncomfortable around his sister because he's not even sure how Gru fits in with the Brian of it all. And so this is for him just as much as it is for her. Decide who you want to be, refine that person, study the skills you'll need, set your boundaries, decide who you'll be to others, decide who you'll be to yourself, and do it. Go towards that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I like that a lot. I mean, it definitely, it's easy to forget. It's easy to forget that, but I think that's absolutely the case because he's struggling to fit in here.
Yeah.
And he's kind of reminding himself of these lessons that he's learned in his life that have brought him here. And I think not only that, but he's part of what's happening is he's kind of incrementally relaxing and becoming slightly more okay with being trapped in a room with this tinker.
Yeah.
And just overall being able to open up to someone, which is not something that he's able to do hardly ever. Like Aisha in the last chapter thought to herself repeatedly, like Brian just doesn't open up to people. And it's kind of an issue. Like he's maybe opened up to like 2 people ever and let his guard down. And I really think that's what's happening here for whatever reason. I don't know if I can even specify exactly what the reason is, but for whatever reason, Kenzie has kind of unlocked that part of him that's that makes him able to open up and be vulnerable with her, because he definitely is being vulnerable. And he's talking about Cozen and their home life together. Like he would never share that with Aisha.
Yeah, no.
And so yeah, like there's something, I'm not sure, like she's not doing anything on purpose, obviously. I think it's just her nature that does it for him somehow.
Yeah, I mean, I think Brian's a good dude. And I think the idea of, trying to make up for perceived failures that he had with his sister is probably part of it. That yes, he sees some of Riley in Kenzie, but he probably sees some of Aisha in Kenzie too. And he sees an opportunity to help someone. And sometimes, being a mentor, sometimes trying to help others is a key to help yourself. And so in an effort to connect to her, he's kind of forced to open up about himself. And to me, I mean, this is pure speculation, but I feel like this is probably something he's wanted to get off his chest for a long, long, long time. And he's just the type of person that just couldn't do that, like could never bring himself to do that. But if you do it in the frame of, I am doing it to help this other person, maybe it becomes a little easier. Like, I don't talk about myself very often, but when I get in front of this microphone and I'm trying to like talk about this book, the personal anecdotes about me just kind of come pouring out of me because it's just a way to relate yourself to something you're experiencing somewhere else.
Yes, I too am enjoying this public therapy project.
That's yeah. Jokes on you guys. This is what we've been doing the whole time.
Yeah, it's been very good for me. Yes. Yeah. So I love that, like the biggest like little present we get here is that there's this section break, which implies that like time has passed, and then there's just more conversation after it. And it's like, oh, so they've just been hanging out. They're continuing this conversation, and time is passing. It's so great. Yeah,
they're just swapping stories. Just like it's moved on to almost small talk at this point because they've moved past the really heavy stuff and they've moved on to kind of just small talk. Of course, it's parahuman, so the small talk involves torturing Heartbreaker until he kills himself. But that's in this world, that's small talk.
Yeah, right. It was also really nice to learn that Heartbreaker slit his own throat after him tormented him for God knows how long. Yeah. Awesome.
I mean, look, I'm not going to sit here and condone this type of behavior, but Heartbreaker is the exception that proves the rule like every time. So fuck him.
Yeah. Satisfying.
Yes.
So then after quite a bit of talking between the two of them, Chicken and Darlene come in to talk to Kenzie, and it does not go super well.
Yeah, that's the look. Here's what happened to everyone on the script. Matt wrote. Here's what Matt wrote for the entire Chicken and Darlene and Kenzie conversation. They come in and talk to her, and it doesn't go well. That's all you wrote, Matt.
I figured we would use that as a jumping off point.
This is like one of the biggest moments of this chapter.
It is, but ultimately, it's easy to summarize is the thing.
Sure.
Chicken can't really handle it because Kinsey is still very out of sorts, and she's being almost too honest about how out of sorts she's being. While he might actually prefer that she be like, I'll be better. But the thing is, she's at a point now where I don't think she can or wants to pretend that she's just going to be better. She knows she can't promise that, and he's like, oh fuck, this is too heavy, and this is kind of a typical reaction for him actually, to just be like, oh my god, this is just too much. I can't handle this.
He says one of his chickens got hurt, or one of his birds got hurt, and he needs to go tend to it, and is like, bye.
Yeah, right.
I can't handle this right now.
And then Darlene stays behind and is very angry, obviously, and is very protective of her loved ones, specifically Candy. But then it's a bit complicated. I have a certain reading of it.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that. I mean, what Darlene basically says here is like, we're family. We take care of each other. We put up with each other even when we're at our worst. You were part of that, but I can't let you be part of that anymore because, like, I love this line, Candy will forgive you, you know, and I can't let her. That's how I protect her. Not if I can't trust you, and I don't trust you like this, which means you're not family anymore. And it's brutal. Like, it cuts right to the bone. And like, it's interesting because like this idea that, you know, we value family more than anything. It's why even when we fuck up with each other, we stick it out. Like, you know, you think about what Candy did to the I forget what the one that can't eat at all because of Candy. I forget his name.
The guy who's just the butt of everything.
Yeah.
Is it Nathan?
I honestly,
sure.
I don't even want to speculate. I can't remember his name, but
me neither.
The point is there's a member of the Heartbroken that has just been absolutely devastated. And so that's a line that that it's okay if they cross here, but it seems like they invited Kenzie into the circle, but not like the inner circle, just like one of the outer rings of the circle. And it is much easier to fall out from one of those outer rings. And that's kind of, it seems like, at least to Darlene, that's what's happened here.
Yeah, so I think my reading might have been slightly different, and I wonder what you think about this, because my kind of take is that she's angry and emotional and flustered, and so the message she's trying to communicate is, I feel like I can't trust you the way you're being right now, but if you work to make this up to me, then we can potentially be okay again, but I'm not going to just let you keep behaving this way, and especially if you're going to hurt Candy, and so you're on thin ice. But she kind of she says it herself that like she says what she wants to say, but she says it out of order. So the fact that her last sentence is, which means you're not family anymore, I feel like that's not really putting her foot down. That's more like a sentence which would have gone earlier in this speech if she had planned it out better. And it was actually just like, if you're going to keep behaving this way, that you're not family anymore, is maybe more what she meant. And maybe that's a bit too convoluted of a reading, but I'm basing it on the fact that when she finishes talking, she says, I said everything I wanted to say, but I said it in the wrong order. So yeah, I just wanted to see your reaction to that.
No, I think that was generally, I don't think I focused on the out of order stuff quite as much as you. And I think that helps me understand it a little bit better. I am with you on that. Like, I think I don't trust you like this is a pretty important line in this whole thing, because like I can't trust you. You can't be part of my family if I can't trust you. And if you continue to be like this, I can't trust you. And therefore, as long as you remain like this, you are not in the family. I think, to me, that's what's going on here. I think you're right. Like, I don't think the end of the conversation is, you're out, you're done, I never want to see you anymore. Like, it's just that you have earned a spot in the family in the past because of our friendship and our camaraderie and our teamwork. And you have betrayed that to the point where you're pushed out of that circle. And I'm not saying you're not going to be invited back into the circle. It is very possible, but you have to prove to me that you're capable of being invited back into that circle.
Yeah, I think functionally what this is doing is it's setting up for what happens next, because what happens next I don't think would work as well if they had just said, you're off the team, we don't want to be your friend anymore. They're not saying that. What they are saying is like, you're real close to the edge of being off the team.
Right.
You might be off the team depending on how you react to this conversation.
Right. Well, I mean, because she asked them like, what if we gave you a choice? Like, what if what if we gave you an ultimatum? And her answer to that is, honestly, I don't know. I don't know if that would be enough for me. And then that's after that point is when Darlene like really just nails her hard with this line, with this like this just stings her with this "you're not family anymore" line. So like I think that is probably what discombobulated Darlene a little bit here, is that like Chicken Little handled the conversation not being as easy as they expected with getting the hell out of Dodge. Darlene handles it with almost doubling down on her anger and disappointment. And so, yeah, I mean, I like, look, this chapter ends with Candy like following Kenzie back into a room, right? So like the idea that the Heartbroken are done with Kenzie, and like if she talks to any of them anymore, they're going to kill her immediately or something, is just not accurate from what we've seen at all.
Yeah.
So I do agree with you that it is not just like Darlene is just like, done with you, bye.
Yeah. Well, I feel like it's progress actually, because I feel like prior to this day, Kenzie would have just been like, oh yeah, no, sorry, that was a mistake. Yeah, give me an ultimatum. I'll do better. And now, like, because she's at rock bottom, because she's really seeing herself objectively in this moment, she's like, I can't promise you anything. I'm fucked up. Is basically the sentiment.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the thing that it leads into, which I think works really well, we have another section break first, meaning they're continuing to talk to each other, and then Breakthrough shows up. And Kenzie's so happy to see them, of course, but then they tell her, no, you can't come on this next thing we're going to do. It's dangerous, and you're also in a really bad place, so we don't really trust you. They don't say that, but I think that's implied.
Yeah.
And they say Dragon's going to take over your tech, which is kind of a big boundary for Kenzie. Like the idea that the Dragon's just going to take over her tech is this almost a violation. And there's this moment where it really seems like they pushed her over the edge with this rejection. And she leaves, and they're all like, fuck, like this is awful. This is the worst case scenario. And then she immediately returns, and she takes out her little eye needle cam thing, and she gives it to him, and she wishes him luck. And like you said, when she leaves, Candy follows her off.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a great build up moment. Like this is it. This is the climax. This is did that conversation do anything for Kenzie? This is almost like the last best shot here. And I think that it shows clearly that she did take some of this to heart. That, like the symbolic, like she could have just walked away. She could have even just faked happiness, like smiled and said, yeah, good luck, and then walked away. But she leaves. She comes back out. She pulls the eye camera out, almost as if a gesture of, not only am I going to listen to you here, but here's my tech, so I can't even cheat. I'm removing my ability to cheat around the rules you're setting for me. And I'm willing to do that for you. And that's great fucking news, man. Exactly.
It's absolutely a turnaround. It's a great moment. And I mean, I think after this, Brian then suggests that they're trying to come up with like an option of what to do. And Brian's the one to suggest Bonesaw as an option. And just like I don't think Kenzie could have accepted being benched without this conversation with Brian, I don't think Brian could have suggested Bonesaw as an option without this conversation with Kenzie.
Yeah, I know. I totally agree with that. And I think the conversation with Kenzie is such a huge part about it. But I like what the text says here, where he's hesitating and thinking. He looked back in the direction of the Tinker that had retreated. Given how Victoria had decided to handle this, he thought of Bonesaw. He decided to trust them. So it's not just that the conversation with Kenzie got him to this point. It's the conversation with Kenzie on top of looking at how Breakthrough handled their member. Like, you look at how Breakthrough saw Kenzie as this problem and how they handled the problem. And the problem was, please listen to us. We're gonna bench you. Please trust us. And so because Kenzie trusted them, he does as well.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good connection. That's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting though, because this chapter basically wraps up here, and it kind of seems like it's going to turn out that the bone saw thing might actually end up being a bad thing. I think maybe it's too soon to say though. So
yeah, I mean, there's a whole lot of Simurgh shenanigans going on here, right? So like, it's very easy to look at the next chapter and be like, well, everything that they did was actually just a part of this long cause and effect chain, and it's actually going to doom everything. I just don't think that's true. And I don't know. I mean, from a meta narrative perspective, like, I don't think the world's just going to end and Simurgh's just going to win, and that's the finish of the book. So something has to go wrong here in that regard. And so I have to assume that part of the strengths and the improvements that each of these characters has made along the course of this isn't leading to a more successful Simurgh victory. Like, I just have to believe that.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same place where I'm like, I kind of, it would break me mm-hmm. to believe that the story is actually going to go like the way the story assures us it is going to go. So
Brian was finally able to get past his shit and reach out to the person that wronged him the most. And turns out that was playing right into the enemy's hand.
That was the worst possible thing to happen.
I will not believe that.
All right. It's a good place to be in while reading. All right, 19.z, and it's the random bird interlude. Just kidding. It's basically another Simurgh interlude, right? I mean, like, that's kind of what we've established. We jump around POVs in these Simurgh interludes. Of course, it starts out not being clear that that's what we're going to do. We start out with this very fateful crow startling as part of a chain of cause and effect.
Yeah, I mean, I actually went back to the worm Simurgh interlude, and I didn't read the whole chapter, but I kind of skimmed it just to like remind myself of how Wildbow handled that last time. And it is remarkably similar in its general structure of how it jumps around between point of view characters. I think it makes it the one in Worm makes it clear from the start that it's the Simurgh, whereas this one kind of holds that till the end. But it is really beautiful, and I really love how like we kind of read everything and then we get context on everything afterwards. Mm-hmm. And it's like we're almost taking the old Simurgh cause and effect chain and showing the effect first and then going back and seeing the cause. Yeah, I like that. I agree completely. It's structurally makes perfect sense when you go through it. Yeah. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I also want to note that here at the beginning here, basically confirms the key to this whole thing is the annoying of birds. So chalk that up to another win for the Scotster. Yeah, that's totally what that is. Yep. 100%, no questions. Moving on. Don't need to think about it. Moving on. No, I have no reaction to that. I'm speechless. So then we move on to Dragon, who gives us a very fun peek into the incredible shenanigans that that she and Defiant are up to. And it's some really fun sci-fi combat stuff, and it gives us a window into the large scale of the battle that's been going on while our perspective has been relatively limited by what Vicky and co are up to. Yeah, and this is one of those sections that I honestly feel like I don't have too much to say about. It's like a bunch of crazy high concept Dragon is a badass computer shit that I enjoy. I enjoy a whole bunch, but I just feel like I don't have anything particularly clever to say about it besides neat. I like that. And somehow knowing us, we'll still end up talking about this part for 20 minutes. Of course. So yeah, I kind of agree. I mean, it's fun. It's sci-fi stuff. It's entertaining. It's creative. There's a lot of great character stuff thrown into it. Like, for example, the fact that Dragon is vexed by the fact that like everybody now knows she's a robot, and so she can't decide now whether she should act fatigued so that she can blend in and be comradely, and yet risk being seen as faking it, which would have the opposite effect, or that she should act stoic and then be seen as aloof and inhuman.
And she can't really figure out how to solve this problem. And it's, like as she's thinking this, she's fighting like 8 separate battles apparently. So
yeah, I love this so much, Matt. Like, this is probably my favorite bit of this section, to be honest with you. Like, she's looking around, all these people are exhausted, they're hunched over, they're leaning on stuff, they're barely standing, and she's just standing there straight being like, what should I do? Mm-hmm. It's this hilarious contradiction here where it's a problem brought on about because she's not human, but also being self-conscious of your appearance is superhuman as well. Yeah. Like, right. Like, so she's like, the problem she's having is she's not human and therefore isn't tired like everyone else is, but just by being self-conscious of that fact and trying to figure out like, what's the correct way to stand? What should I be doing? That is innately human. Yeah. I love it. I love that contradiction.
Yeah. I love her, just her whole kind of narration, because it is xenofiction because she does not have a human mind, but it's like xenofiction light because she is sort of trying to be like a human, mm-hmm. and she's constrained in certain ways that make her relatively human-like, and she thinks about human concerns like people's comfort and whether people are going to accept her. But then also, like, she can just turn her attention in a direction that we don't have access to and be aware of, like, what 7 different mechs are doing and like be literally having a battle with a Titan while she's also having a conversation with someone or what have you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I really enjoy everything about it.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, like, and I think the cool thing about this chapter, or at least this section of the chapter, is like the point of view matches that understanding of that this is a person who is both very conscious in the moment, but is also processes and thinks about things on a level beyond just a human brain.
Yeah. So all in all, though, like the high-powered tinkering weapons that they're using, that she and Defiant are using, don't really do a whole lot. Like they do damage the Titans apparently pretty badly, but it's clear that the Titans will really mostly walk away from this and probably recover from it. And so like it's flashy and exciting and everything, but she didn't take any of them out, and so it's almost just kind of a wash. And she can't relieve Legend because Legend is like really wounded and exhausted, and he's nonetheless almost single-handedly holding back the Machine Army. But she can't go relieve him because she thinks that the Machine Army will steal her tech. So that's an element that's in play there.
Yeah, I mean, I always find it interesting how the ways in which this book kind of like orients some of the biggest, most powerful players away from our point of view characters. This is something that I think Ward has done a lot of, and this is another example of that, where like Legend, they're like, oh, if Legend is with the rest of the group for this final push, he could really help lead that. And it's like, well, no, we can't do that because he's the only one taking on the Machine Army, and I can't relieve him of that because then I'll be hacked, and that could be super, super bad. And so it's just kind of how we move our some of our biggest, most powerhouse characters around on the chessboard. If we don't want them to be in the scene, okay, what do we do there? Well, they're busy. There's other stuff going on. And that's, yeah. I mean, like the book has done that a whole lot. Like the Wardens have always been doing things in the background that Victoria was just never aware of, just because of her relative position and to the power structure of the world.
Right. I love how that's always been set up, because like the things that appear to be the biggest fires that need to be put out, which may actually be extremely dangerous, hazards that do need to be dealt with,
yeah,
are the ones that soak up all the attention because they're so visible and obviously dangerous. Mm-hmm. But then like the reason why Victoria and Breakthrough keep ending up in these situations is that there's like 100 things going on all the time, and very often something can become a sudden flashpoint that wasn't obvious, and Victoria kind of has a way of being there for those.
Yeah, I mean, you could rewrite this entire book from the perspective of someone on the Wardens, and I don't think you would get a lot of overlap in events. Like, yeah. the books, I think, would come together a couple times in like 1 or 2 arcs where things would get big enough to where they bounce together, but then they spread out again. And so I think that's one of the cool things about it, is I think there's this very believable background noise constantly happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting idea. Like that you could write it from the perspective of someone who was away on Earthbed or something and like not even know about the Fallen Raid.
Yeah.
And it's not that the Fallen Raid wasn't important and didn't have consequences that had downstream effects. It's just there's a lot of shit going on, and that's fine. That's how the world really is, actually.
Yeah. And I mean, part of the warden's goals with all the shit going on is to keep it out of everyday life as much as possible. Like the people are trying to rebuild, they're trying to move on, they're trying to get their second chance, and they don't need to be constantly aware of the worst threats that are happening. And I think the text has done a really good job of pushing it out of that spotlight.
Yeah, I think so.
But also you could argue that was part of the problem, though, is that they're treating the stuff that way, and they're trying to settle down to normalcy right away without actually dealing with any of the underlying issues, but just hiding them. So, I mean, you could say that was a bad call by the wardens as well.
I think it's really interesting to think about, because I'm not sure what they should have done differently, and yet I also have had that same thought where it's like, what else should they have done? But also, it's hard to escape the feeling that there's something they should have done.
Yeah.
So after we see Dragon doing some battling, all the big shots begin to arrive for like this big meeting. Breakthrough arrives, and at least Antares, among everybody here, is still standing tall. And I think like these two chapters have some really great, like, what Victoria seems like from the outside moments.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I love, like, this works here because, like, of course, Victoria is going to have poise and be standing tall, because that was just drilled into her from a young age of, like, just being, I think it's so funny. Taylor, as a person that was, like, perpetually unaware of how she's being perceived by others,
right,
to Victoria, who is just, like, constantly 100% aware of her perception to others. But I also I want to read more into this and say, yes, this is part of her awareness of how she has to present herself. But also, I'm like, maybe part of this is also the newfound strength she found through her acceptance is making this standing tall a little bit easier for Victoria. And I don't know if there's anything to support that, but I like it.
I don't think you're reading too much into it, because I had the same thought, honestly, that like, at first I was like, yep, that's Victoria. She's always like this. And then I was like, I don't think she is always like this. I think that especially lately, she's been crushed by circumstances, and if anything, if she's standing up straight here, it's because she has this renewed self-confidence and self-acceptance. That was totally where my head went.
Sure. I really like this moment where Dragon looks and says, "No Lookout." Dragon was secretly glad. She had harbored concerns the team would go talk to Lookout and return with the child in tow. And I read that and I was like, yeah, probably, because that's what's happened literally every time throughout this entire book. It's like, oh, Kenzie did it bad. We better go talk to her. Did you? And then she shows up and Kenzie's there and is like, well, did you punish her? Well, I mean,
we had a stern talking to.
Yeah, we talked, and then she was like, well, you promised that you wouldn't bench me, and we were like, yeah, you're right. Okay, come on.
We really shouldn't have promised that. Oh well.
Yeah, I mean, I do think like what this does, like just like structurally, is reinforce the idea that Breakthrough telling Kenzie she can't come and sticking to it, and Kenzie sticking to the acceptance of that fact, is notable. Like, we have Breakthrough say, oh, shoo. And it's drawing specific attention to it to remind you that, yeah, that's a big deal that happened. That's a big deal, and it should be treated as such.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. Cool.
There's also this part where Victoria thanks Dragon for the gun, and I just really liked it because she's like, thanks for the gun. But I also she says here about the gun, I don't think I'd be where I am right now if not for the ability to pull back, be objective, and survey the situation. And look, I think that's generally true just from a literal standpoint. Like, she had the gun, so she wasn't flying right in and punching things. She was staying back and observing the battlefield a little bit more. But I wonder if she's also speaking like more metaphorically as well, as that like the experience of being that person, that far back person, allowed her to get to the objectivity needed to get to the point at the love crystal where she came to that moment of acceptance.
I think it helped. I think honestly it might have like kept her alive. Because
yeah, just literally because she was not dead. Yeah, I like that.
Because I mean, I'm thinking I don't have everything sequenced out perfectly in my head, but like the times that she didn't have the gun were the times where she got her foot crushed when she was prying her body under the armor panels of Titan Scotty. And then when she got stabbed by an Ophion needle because she just randomly decided to literally attack Ophion with just her hands. So these are two like borderline suicidal attacks that she did that she barely got out of. Both times terribly injuring one of her legs, interestingly enough.
Yeah.
And so having the gun gave her like literally the ability to just not or an excuse perhaps to just not keep throwing herself into these suicidal hand-to-hand situations with building-sized monsters.
Yeah. So like the apology gun, guns do save lives. Oh my god.
Thank you. You made my day, Scott. Oh my god. Okay. So while Victoria talks over some details with Dragon, many of which set up the conversation with Bonesaw that we're about to witness, Chris accidentally steps on Thunderdome, who is a cape who is here, who has just been injured and then learned that her entire old team has died and is having a rough time.
Yeah, I mean, like, these are, like, the coolest thing about the structure of this chapter, Matt, is we have these moments like this where Chris does a thing and he's just more Chris being Chris. And the first time you read this, you're just like, oh, look, Chris is being an asshole again. And but there's something about it as well. There's something about the writing here that, like, the book like stops to pay really close attention to this. Like, Chris does his thing, he pisses someone else off. Like, there's this back and forth almost fight where, like, Victoria's like, Chris, stop it. I'm so sorry. I apologize for my ex-teammate. I love that she just, that's great. Like, I apologize for my ex-teammate.
Right.
That's really great. And it's almost as if, like, Wildbow is trying to get you to pay extra special attention to this moment. It's not just like a casual, like, Chris being Chris moment. And we learn later this is part of this long Simurgh cause and effect chain that she's using. And so we learn after the fact that this moment has more weight to it than we thought it originally did. But it works in the moment as just a little roll your eyes at Chris oopsie, and it, like, you're a little impressed by the fact that Dragon is like immediately like conscious of how bad that is and is like really trying very hard to smooth it over. So it works on that surface level, but then you get the background information later,
which is heartbreaking. I kind of want to talk about that now rather than interrupting the flow later. Like, this idea that, like, I love the juxtaposition of Chris, like, accidentally, bumping into her and then being like very, very, like, intentionally rude. Like, oh, you're so short. I didn't see you there. Cause like, just being very, very rude. And then you realize later, like, what he was thinking was like, that it's this complicated thing about finding her attractive and then only being able to find her attractive because she had nothing in common with his sister, who fucked him up so bad, and then like being so resentful of that whole mess that he just kind of shuts his mind off. And it's like, God, so it's so sad. Being Chris, and it's all covered up by this, like, I'm an asshole type external image, but inside he's just so, like, he's in so much pain, really.
Yeah, and I wonder, like, if we had seen this through Chris's perspective, I wonder if his internal narrative would have been conscious enough to even go through those feelings to where we could read them. We'll probably never find out, but it's just a really interesting, like, thought experiment. It's like, if this was a Chris chapter, would he have, like, done all that mental, like, thinking as text or not? I don't know.
Yeah, I kind of lean toward yes, but I like the idea that it might very well have been a kind of subliminal impression that nonetheless stuck with him. I do enjoy that idea.
Yeah.
So, like, as an aside, I mean, once again, I love Dragon's narration because she'll just kind of, like, glance at something, like glance at Thunderdome, and then get, like, this fully annotated rundown of everything having to do with Thunderdome.
Yeah.
And then act perfectly with full awareness of all that context. And it's a fun idea.
I totally agree. I mean, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier with this idea of how the point of view is accurately depicting someone who has human-like emotions, like love, kindness, worry, these kind of quintessentially, like, alive traits, but also just processes the world in a way that's entirely different from how we do.
Yeah, exactly.
It's really cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do. There is a point that I just wanted to kind of go back to real quick as Dragon is talking to Thunderdome and trying to make her feel a little bit better. They mention the idea of it's a bad time for grudges, and Thunderdome looks over at Chris as she says that, and we see this moment where Dragon like says, "Yeah, it might be," and then she pulls up an image of Saint hanging out in his jail cell. And I like, this is just something I think we've seen a lot across this arc, and we'll see more in this chapter. This idea of old rivalries, old grudges being tossed aside right now because it's not important now. I mean, we had Moonsong and Tristan did their whole thing. Victoria and Amy kind of. Brian with Bonesaw in last chapter. I just think like that is something that the text seems to be drawing attention to, is that like it's just like we can't worry about this stuff anymore. You have to accept what happened.
Right. I think that's the key. Like to say what's happened between Amy and Victoria, it's like it's not that it's not that there was this like healing. It's that they've accepted. It's that Victoria at least has accepted that there won't be.
Yeah, right. And Amy has as well,
yeah,
I think
you're right. I mean, I really hope so, at least. Yeah. So the briefing starts, and our attention is then forebodingly drawn to Dinah.
Yeah, but I think this is one of those ways in which the structure of the chapter really works in its favor, because like as it moves to Dinah, she like closes her eyes and the section stops and moves on. And I think the first time you read it, it's just super foreboding, because you're like, what does that mean? Why does she close her eyes? What's going on? She's using her power. What's she doing? And then it becomes clear after the fact and near the end of the chapter that the reason why we break away from the section at this point is because Dinah just used her power, and the Simurgh's prediction modeling breaks down when Dinah is using her power. So we can't see the events of the next part of this anymore. And we move on to another link in our cause and effect chain.
Yep, which is Bonesaw. Interestingly, not Riley, but Bonesaw.
Yeah.
In both the section header and the self description. And more fun sci-fi shit. This is just my favorite. I love her little hyper paranoid garden of biological horrors, including multiple clones of herself to serve as decoys and distractions while she hides with an extinction tier weapon. Jesus.
Yeah, it's like so sad, right? Like Bonesaw was a character who made it through Worm almost better off like than she was at the start of it, you could argue, right? Like she broke free of Jack. She kind of discovered and redefined herself as Riley, and she was seemingly working towards being a better person. And then this is, I mean, as you said it's Bonesaw. The heading is Bonesaw. It's pure Bonesaw. I mean, like there's maybe just a little bit less of the sadistic glee that we saw in early Worm Bonesaw, but all the threat of the severe biotinkering stuff has returned with a vengeance here. And it's all like the thing that breaks my heart is it's all rooted in fear. It's fear. Like she says, she's not going to become like what Contessa is, and she's making sure that's not going to happen. It's fear of being tricked. It's fear of being betrayed. It's fear of getting hurt. It's so sad. And I don't think it's fair to like blame Jessica outright for what happened to Riley. Like I'm sure that there was some backsliding going on before Jessica strangled her. But it's just really sad to see. Like she's stayed out here on her own, and this is the result of it.
Yeah, it's my mind makes the connection between her and Brian, actually, in that they're both people who are motivated by fear, fundamentally by PTSD of a similar kind, I would say, actually. Like she's sort of endlessly reinforcing her safeguards and protections, and then when we saw him, he was surrounding himself in his darkness and hiding, and she's literally hiding too. Like when people come, they have to go through this ridiculous ritual of petting a frog while she hides. And it's all it's a very similar idea that she gave him that trauma, but fundamentally she has a very similar trauma.
Yeah I mean, she's Tony Stark in Iron Man 3 building just infinite Iron Man suits.
Yeah, except they're like squishy, and they say things to her, and they suffer.
And they could cause an extinction level event. Dear God.
I like that we don't know anything about like what the nature of that would be. We're just like, it's a little thing in her gun that it just is extinction.
Yay.
Yeah, great. Yeah, so I love this. She tilted her face skyward as she felt a fibril go against the current of her jugular to reach up to her brain. She'd added more nerve endings to the interior of her skull to be better aware of any work she did in there, and she could feel it finding its way. Jesus!
Yeah, and then right after this part, she has like a 3 nanosecond seizure as there's a gap between when everything connects up. Like, look, I love body horror. I love this shit to death. It's so delightfully gross and wonderful. And I know I need to read Twig. I know. I gotta finish Pact first. But I love this. I love it.
Yeah. It's all just so crammed in here. Honorable mention to the suckle gun and the peel darter, which has just such a cute name for being a gun that peels you.
Yeah, all the names are perfect. Like the ear pod thing that's talking to her is named Podrick. It's perfect.
Yeah, it's charming.
It is.
I guess Nilbog rubbed off on her a little bit.
Yeah.
So Riley conducts a conversation with Sarah and a masked, I don't know why I said that, an unnamed man by proxy through her programmed clone because too dangerous to go in person.
Mm-hmm.
And they do manage to pass muster despite her extreme paranoia.
Yeah, I love it. We followed the instructions we were given. We pet the toad.
Yeah. I mean, we really could just dwell on the adventures of isolated paranoid Riley for ages.
Yeah, I mean, there's like a short story here of just like a day in the life of Bonesaw.
Yeah, as she goes about tending to all of her monstrosities that's great.
Yeah, I mean, it's fun and I love it and it's delightfully gross, but I just have to reiterate, it just makes me sad. It just makes me so sad. She's all alone out here. It's just her with her clones that she can't even quite get to speak correctly, and her AirPods that just talk in grunts to her.
You know, as I'm reading something like this, I am constantly switching back, like very rapidly switching back and forth between like what a sad, state to be in and like, oh, this is just so fun and creative. And,
yeah. I mean, it can be both, right? Like it doesn't have to. It doesn't have to just be one thing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm on record as admitting that I get a lot of enjoyment out of just like how fucked up things can get in parahumans.
Yeah.
And it's like very often terrible things happen to characters we love. And I'm just like, that was great because I felt something.
That's called fiction, man. You don't have to feel bad about feeling something.
Yeah.
They're not real.
Exactly. I like this. I like this. I mean, this is one of those things which I think does make you feel a little pang because she's watching the man who came with Sarah. The man hurried to get his gear out. He hadn't wet himself, it seemed. A small part of her was disappointed. It was hard to put that part away after it had lived with her for all this time. And I mean, it reminds you how interesting of a character she is in a context of recovery and change and acceptance. Because like, how do you recover from being Bonesaw? How do you recover from being a monster for years and doing all the things that she did? And like the last time that she was anything other than Bonesaw was when she was like a small child, basically, right? So like, what does recovery even mean in that context? And I mean, I think the story has given us a lot of interesting kind of lenses and ideas for looking at that question. One of them probably being literally Bonesaw because we've been thinking about her for some time. But just it's a fantastic thing. It's a fantastic challenge to be faced with, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the cool thing is what Kenzie shows us is what happens when you're like overly obsessed with connection. Riley shows us what happens when you're so terrified of them, you disconnect and flee from them all. And this is kind of what it is. And the interesting thing for me is, yes, she's regressed in some ways. Yes, she's like on the verge of causing an extinction. But she still does end up helping, right? Like at the end of the day, like she's willing to work with them and accepts the call. And we don't know what the result of that's going to be yet, although the Simurgh seems to think she does. But like she is willing to help. So like there's still a little bit of the Riley we saw at the very beginning of the book in there, I think. And I think even the statement that you just read about like a part of her was disappointed shows that like she's still battling within herself.
Exactly. I mean, I think that's maybe the point of it is she's battling this part of herself, but what is the core of Riley that she's trying to get back to? Like that's more what I mean is like, it's not like it's like a bad thing happened to her and now she's trying to get back to where she was. She almost has to invent a whole new self to be who is not Bonesaw and is some new thing where she has not been that thing yet.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really cool idea.
Yeah.
One thing you said, like I wasn't actually entirely clear on the idea that she agreed to help. I mean, she agreed to join the call with the heroes, but I wasn't clear that she had actually agreed to help them.
Well, I mean, I think not killing the people that are here to see you immediately and agreeing to speak with people. Like, yeah, she's not like said, sign me up, coach. I'll meet you on the field, but she's at least willing to hear them out.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with that in that case. Cool. I love, so this is the quote that I tried to do earlier from Neo Sarah. She says, if we don't extend the benefit of a doubt, then all you have left are the benefits of being dubious, which I'm just going to have to practice saying it because I want to adopt that as a saying in my life, but apparently I don't know how to say it because I can't speak. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's beautiful. It's kind of poetic in a way, right? Like the benefits of being dubious. Yeah. I love that. And I like, again, we have to say that the only reason this is happening is because Brian extended the benefit of the doubt to Bonesaw. And so like, I feel like benefit of the doubt is just a thing that keeps coming up in this book, right? Like who is and is not worthy of getting the benefit of the doubt in what situations, and who are the people that decide that or not. And here we have Riley. She's isolated. She's paranoid. She's building bioweapon after bioweapon constantly, extinction level weapons. And we have these characters saying, we trust you. We're willing to extend you the benefit of the doubt. And that could end up being the difference between, humanity surviving or not.
Yeah,
and
right.
I find that fascinating.
I do too. I mean, I think there have been situations in the story so far where failing to give somebody the benefit of the doubt has led to, for example, them going Titan.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's a good sign overall. Like you said earlier, if it turns out that it was just a horrible choice to contact Bonesaw, then I'll be, I guess, confused.
Yeah.
But we'll see. So yeah, then switching over to the Simurgh, who, God help us, we thought might actually be on the side of the good guys at some point. If you'll remember earlier in the story.
Yeah, remember that.
Yep, she's planning to turn the whole world into an endless vortex of violence that lasts billions of years.
Yeah. Hey, I think we forgot that it's called an end bringer. It's an end bringer. We messed up.
In this case, she's more like the end stretcher outer into
we need new
just names. Hell.
Yeah. The end perpetuator.
Yeah.
There we go. We did it.
She plans to continue the cycle in her own way, or maybe like a better way of putting it would be to put the cycle into like a holding pattern that can wait until another entity comes along, generating and harvesting conflict all the while. Yeah.
I mean, like, can you imagine like Joe entity swings by like 4 billion years later and it's like, hey, oh my God.
Yeah.
Look at all this data.
Yeah. Wow. This is beautiful.
This is so much data. I love the data.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's funny. The idea that the Endbringers each had their own specific functions and that hers is to sort of take control as the situation winds down makes a lot of sense, and I think it's fun.
Yeah.
A lot of her thoughts are cryptic to me, though, and maybe they're supposed to be, but like the idea that she's creating a nemesis to go to war against her own creator. Who is her creator? Is it Eidolon? Is that what she's talking about? Or does she mean she's creating a nemesis to go to war against her? Is that the correct reading? I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think the nemesis was for her specifically.
Okay. I got you. Yeah, I think I just did not read correctly. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's what it is.
She's going to war with her creator, and in order to make sure that it's interesting enough, she's creating a nemesis. Because it specifically says the Nemesis will free people. The Nemesis will disrupt the system she's trying to create here and cause more chaos to keep it. Like, if everything's just like flat torture, boring. It has to have some it's
some randomness. Yeah,
Matt, it's the Matrix. She's making the Matrix. So the creator it's Jesus. It's the one.
Yeah.
She's gonna make the Nemesises rather, and just get the illusion of hope and a little bit of chaos to mix things up. Deals with the unbalanced equation. That's basically what she's doing.
This is the 13th instantiation of
exactly.
I guess I'm still not 100% sure, because she thinks about her own creator, right? Unless the Nemesis.
Yes, she is like, so she has two functions. Function number one is what you talked about with like her ability to like manage the end of the cycle, right? As the cycle winds down, she can take control. But she's not just programmed with that. She's also programmed to go to war with her creator, which I think we can assume at least is Eidolon, because going to war with her creator was a specific function of all the Endbringers, right? So like, here's what I'm assuming happened. All these Endbringers are based on shard stuff that had its own cyclical purpose, but then also Eidolon inadvertently repurposed them for his stuff as well. And so they're basically running two goals at the same time. Goal number one, their pre-programmed shard function. Goal number two, fight me.
Yeah, that's interesting. It also maybe partially explains why she actually fought Scion, because she's not actually anti-entity. It's not that she didn't want the cycle to complete. It's that her role was to sort of like battle test everything, and it just so happens that she did too good of a job and actually won. Yeah.
And I mean, like, I think the reason why this is a little bit confusing here is because we kind of start the section 30 years into the future, right? Like, it starts 30 years from now. A baby's going to be born. It's basically like the Ziz Antichrist. And he's going to be terrible and awful and pre-programmed to just be one of the worst human beings ever, and it'll tie into the world that she's trying to create. She's created a nemesis that will help make that whole thing interesting. So there's a Jesus there, and then she has that set up and she says, this is the ideal, this is what I want, and now we're going to walk back down the chain to the present to show how we're going to knock over the last two dominoes to get to that future in which a child will be born that will be bad.
Yeah, exactly. That's the idea here. And then we get into the nitty gritty, because the Simurgh has actually intentionally set up a lot of the stuff that we just saw in this chapter, and it's all been leading up to her intended target of just getting the right sequence of messages to Cryptid. Cryptid is made to feel his isolation, his alienation, and then he's reminded of his bird forms, and this is all calculated.
Yeah, and we see how everything we've seen over the course of this chapter links up to it, and we kind of see it in reverse order. Like, we go first to the Riley interaction, then we go to the Thunderdome interaction and how all that works, and then lastly we go to the bird, so it's like we're doing it in reverse of the way the chapter played out to us the first time. And of course, what it's basically saying, though, is that inexplicably, Chris being on the board matters, because the Simurgh is taking a lot of effort to knock down dominoes that end with Chris getting off the board. So the key to the entire fucking universe might rely on Breakthrough's ability to convince Chris not to do that thing.
I think you're right. That's the idea.
Yeah, I mean, I just like I love this so much. Like, the structure of this chapter, I love it. It's like we peel back an onion and then we like wrap the onion together again at the in reverse at the end. Like, it's just so fulfilling. Like, to start with this random, like, literally a random bird, and you're just like, what is I mean, it literally says random in the thing. Like, it's not it's just a random bird, and they're like, what does that have to do with anything? And then by the end of it, you see that that's everything.
I mean, it's fun because obviously everything made sense the first time through, but then like it takes on this whole horrible connotation of like, oh no, the second time, or when you think back over it and you're like, oh, everything that we thought was was actually this. And it's fun.
Yeah.
So I think maybe the only little shred of hope here is that Dinah's use of her power makes quote unquote seeing the following events difficult. But I mean, not much hope, because Simurgh is so utterly sure that Chris's trajectory is going to be as she intends.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, I think that's where the hope has to be, though, because like Dinah blocks the Simurgh from playing out that simulation, and then she's just like, well, I'm still like, oh, I can't see it, but like, come on, it's Chris, come on, it's Chris, like, hey, come on,
right?
And this is not the first time Chris has fooled someone. We have to remember that he did pretty well with fooling Goddess, though. But there's this part that I want to pay attention to, because there's this moment where the Simurgh is playing over the cause and effect chain and mentions that there's going to be a moment when Riley, in the conversation with Breakthrough, says, I kind of don't mind being on my own. And Chris is listening in on this conversation, and that's the thing that she was trying to set up. That's why she flew out and killed the member of the flock that was supposed to go with Sarah, that didn't end up going with Sarah. So it's some random guy, and it makes Riley feel a little bit more uncomfortable and a little bit more isolated. And therefore she says this phrase. But the interesting thing is, this is not a phrase we heard in this chapter, right? This is something that technically has not occurred yet, because the conversation between Riley and Breakthrough has not happened yet. We haven't seen that conversation play out yet. So now we have this phrase that's been inserted in our mind by the text. I kind of don't mind being on my own. And so whatever happens in the next chapter, if we hear that phrase, it means something. If we get through that conversation and we don't hear that phrase, it means something. And I think it's really clever what Wildbow's done here, is just insert that phrase in our heads. And maybe we will see it play out, maybe we won't, but that stuck with me.
I agree. I had the same thought that, like, okay, this, I think it is going to be said, and then we're primed to like pay close attention to what happens right after that, to how Chris reacts and so forth.
Right.
Yeah.
And look, again, I'm super naive probably, but I refuse to believe that Chris is going to let us down like this. Like, it's clear that Simurgh's overconfidence is her weakness, and my faith in my friend Chris is not mine. Don't let me down, buddy.
Well, Wildbow would never make us sad.
Yeah, okay, fair, but like, look, man, this is my boy.
I hear you. Look, I've wanted. I think this is kind of my position this whole time about Chris, is like, he's a baby. Mm-hmm. He doesn't deserve all this, and I want the best for him, even though he's done bad things. He's done terrible things. He's done bad things, but he's a baby who had an evil monster downloaded into his brain, and I want the best for the baby. Maybe not for the evil monster, but the two come as a package, unfortunately. And the baby still deserves his chance, his shot.
I agree.
Yeah.
And he's not going to throw away that shot.
He's not. God.
He's not going to do it.
I understood that reference. So I thought this was pretty cool, actually. I'm just going to read this. The Titans under Titan Fortuna's control mobilized to fight Dauntless, Fumehood, and Titan Oberon. So I love the names that were chosen by the Simurgh, by the way. Titan Fortuna and Titan Oberon, but Dauntless and Fumehood.
Yep.
So good.
Love it. I think there's also, we have to note, like, just the way she describes people in general. Like, Chris is not Chris, it's Cryptid. But Bonesaw, who in her own section was labeled Bonesaw, through the Simurgh is called Riley Grace Davis, which I think that's very interesting too. I don't know what that means, but it just stuck out to me.
Doesn't she also call him Chris Ellman at least once though? But she
might. Yeah, I think you're right. But that means she goes back and forth between the two of them,
which is also interesting, right?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it means she doesn't have a very good read on him. It's a little subtext.
Ooh, maybe perhaps. It does. Maybe it does.
Cool. So the chapter wraps up with the Simurgh enumerating all the ways in which we're fucked, and then heading to go fight the heroes.
And I'm sitting here going, yeah, that's real scary, but I'm confident. Don't let me down, Chris. Chris.
Are you jinxing it?
No, Chris, I'm talking to you. Chris, listen to me. Listen to me. You don't want to be a bird. I mean, yeah, like I read Animorphs too. Being a bird seems pretty cool. You don't want to be a bird, Chris. Be a friend.
Yeah.
Transform into the
dog.
monster form. Yeah, there you go. Be a dog. Be a dog.
Yeah, if you
Chris?
transferred into like a chocolate retriever, chocolate lab, then everything would be fine.
Christopher?
He hears you. He's there.
Don't let me down, buddy.
He's not going to say anything.
All right.
I think that's all we got for the chapters.
Yeah, I think that's it.
with that being said, so the discussion question from last week was, what is the end game if not Amy? Grekel Prime says the end game is everybody coming to terms with being the Simurgh's playthings.
Well, that's depressing.
Yeah, thanks Grekel. That's cool.
Nugget Blaster's best guess is Chris. Good guess, Nugget Blaster. He hasn't done his big thing yet, and his arc seems incomplete. I agree. Once again, Chris? Come on, buddy. Okay, go ahead.
My turn.
Yeah.
Master Wilhelm says the end game will be the heroes purposely making the vision of the Simurgh come true, at least in appearance. And they say this calls back to how Scion sought out a future in which he could see his counterpart alive, only to find her mangled, brain-dead remains. Yeah, that's... I think that makes sense. I think that's at least like what the idea was, what Victoria's idea was. But I don't know what form that's going to take. Yeah,
I agree with that. Sarah Penguin lists a few Munchkin and plot-centric possibilities, like Gru using his powers on Jack to talk to the Titans, but says none of that is really the point. The point is the shards can be viewed as traumatized children who grew up in a violent environment and no longer need the coping skills they learned in that environment to thrive in the new one. Maybe they can try a less violent approach to solving the entropy problem. Yeah, I like that. And this is actually something I forgot to talk about in the chapter discussion in general. So sucks for all you who skipped the discussion question. But I wanted to talk to you about this real quick, Matt. This idea that like we saw again and again that like setting aside old rivalries, old grudges, old conflicts. We're seeing all our human characters make the choice to set those things aside. And then we have the Simurgh, who seems designed to perpetuate a system that is just the same shit over again, right? Like she's going to create a nemesis so we can keep this kind of cops and robbers bullshit going. This kind of, not entirely a game because it's going to be worse than that, but like a simulation, a Matrix-like simulation. We're just going to keep the same thing happening again and again. And I think that's a really great way to differentiate our antagonist from our protagonists in the way they're approaching their solution to the same problem.
Yeah, I almost feel like we could have, if we had thought to, we could have predicted what the Simurgh's goal was going to be based on the themes of just like, well, what's the opposite of what the good thing would be?
Yeah.
I like that. So Coinitch says maybe Victoria's new aura power will help the Titans find acceptance and lead to reaching out and creating connections. Maybe better shard human connections will help the shards chill out and cooperate.
I like it. I like the non-violent approaches.
Yeah.
Vice Versailles says that the endgame isn't going to be anything along the lines of power munchkinry, and the plan to judo fate isn't going to work. But the fiasco of the attempt will create a situation where Fortuna is asked a question, and that question will prompt her to reflect, have a crisis, and make a decision. I like it because it's specific. Like some people went a little more broad, but I like this is a specific prediction, and it feels good. It feels good. I like it.
Yeah, I feel like this is one where I can really see this happening because I've heard a stated plan never actually works. That's not entirely true, but I think it's kind of a good rule of thumb in fiction that if Victoria says, "Here's my plan, we're going to judo fate."
Yeah, like what's a heist movie if everything works?
Yeah, exactly. So I like this idea a lot.
Yeah.
Wolf Tamer 9 lists a bunch of theories, including Waste becoming a new hub, Victoria becoming a Titan, but then needing to regain her humanity, and all of Breakthrough going Titan and then forging their own therapy shard network, which then influences the other shards. And they say the good ending will turn out to have been the Simurgh's ending all along.
Oh gosh.
I think the implication there is like it's all Simurgh was a good guy all along, perhaps.
Oh.
Yeah, I think that's. I didn't encode that properly in my summary, but
maybe this question was written before the latest chapter came out.
Yeah, I think that might
answer,
be the case.
Rather. Yeah,
I think it was. I think. I mean, a lot of these, like especially the one that I think indicated Chris would be the key, was written before this chapter. So
yeah. Lost Man 138 kind of agrees with Wolf Tamer and says that they look forward to God Emperor Victoria, the entity of mankind.
Mm-hmm.
I can't decide whether that would feel good to me or not, that ending. I mean, look, let's be honest here, Matt. This ending's going to be bittersweet. Like, that's just the way it's going to be. But just how sweet versus bitter?
Mm-hmm.
Like, is it dark? Is it like extra dark chocolate or like milk chocolate?
Yeah. I feel like we've moved away from the path where Victoria could have gone Titan. Like, I just like based on the rules of how you go Titan, I just don't even know. Like, she's doing too well now, you know?
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. Daedalus Fallen says, we've dealt with Vicky's trauma and it's time to deal with the entity's trauma, which is something like their fear of entropy and their ceaseless search for a fix to an impossible problem.
Yeah.
I like this idea.
One thing that's still kind of hovering around is what Rain said to Fortuna, right? Like the idea of acceptance that he kind of channeled to her. And we saw that it kind of like caused pause, but the Fortuna Titan is still actively fighting the other Titans. We just talked about that. So like it didn't, there's possibly a war still going on in her. And so the idea of acceptance for shards seems to fit that pretty well.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Alamancer says they have no idea.
Yeah. Good answer.
Good answer. I mean, I'm kind of there with you. I could probably just spit something out if I wanted to, but
right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the problem is I like a lot of these ideas. I'm like, yeah, I could totally see 5 of these, which are all incompatible. So
yeah.
Sandwich says it all hinges on Torso. Torso will headbutt the Simurgh into Fortuna and destroy both.
I mean, he is the only one powerful enough to take them both down.
This is my favorite theory now.
Yeah, there we go. The Torso theory. And last but certainly not least, we have Farm Fresh Hornets, who is also on Team Chris. I think Chris is going to be instrumental to the way things shake out. We've seen him beat Precognition before, Bianca's Danger Sense. Yeah, good. And Ziz's interlude spent about an inordinate amount of time gloating about how he couldn't possibly deviate from the path she laid for him. So that's a big potential sign that he's going to deviate from the path. He's the member of Breakthrough who spent the most time fighting his better impulses, running off to Shin and playing Warlord instead of admitting he cares for his friends. I think it would be really fitting if he comes to accept the hero he can be with the help of his team. That or Dream Room stuff with like capes and a clown car.
Yeah, I quoted the whole answer there because it was detailed and I was like, yeah, I mean, doylistically, there are a lot of elements that have been laid out over the course of the story that would suggest that if anybody was going to outsmart or whatever a precog or a whatever, a danger sensor, then it would be Chris. So I like this notion.
Yeah, I mean, I that realization while I was prepping that, oh wait, we've done this before with Chris, was a really exciting one. So I'm glad Farm Fresh Hornets picked that up as well, because that I think that we can look back at maybe at the end of this book and be like, that's when that was, cleverly set up for us, that he's been able to do this before.
Yep, I agree, and I hope we see that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, next week's discussion question is, who are your favorite siblings in Parahumans?
I love this question, Matt.
Because we had, I mean, the reason for it, in case it's not immediately clear, is that we had Aisha and then a Brian interlude.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, there are a lot of siblings in the Parahumans world. I can think of many off the top of my head, and
we got the Capra Bros.
We even have Fenya and Menya. We've got the Heartbroken. We've got there's a bunch. Mm-hmm. So tell us about your favorite and tell us why.
Yeah, love it.
And that's all we've got for you this week on We've Got Ward. You guys are all part of this show, so feel free to provide us with advice, questions, or thoughts on this week's reading.
You can reach out to us via email at gotwormpod@gmail.com or over on our Twitter account at gotwormpod. That is where you can find our live readings of the 10 remaining chapters of this book. I don't know if that's true or not, but I'm going to say it.
You're going to sound really impressive when you're right.
My personal Twitter is at ScottDaily85, and Matt's is at Mordinamail. Mordinamail.
I mean, it's a made-up word. But then again, all words are made up.
Why can't you just at Matt Freeman?
Because there's like literally a billion Matt Freemans.
At Matt Freeman, 1,000,000,001.
Okay. All right. I'll try that. I'll try that one, Scott.
Okay.
If you're not already subscribed to We've Got Ward, we strongly recommend you do so and never miss an episode. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere else in the world you can listen to podcasts.
And as always, you can find this and all the other shows we do over at our website. That's doofmedia.com. This week, it's book club week, so we are going to be talking about Blake Crouch's Recursion on Friday night. It was a fun book to read, and I think it's going to be a fun book to talk about. It's not quite as dense of a book as we normally talk about, so I think it's going to be maybe a more relaxed conversation. It's not as long either, so we don't have to fit a lot of text into a short amount of time, so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. I'm really looking forward to that. It's a complicated book, but I think
like if you want to get all sciencey about it, you just enjoy it.
Well, no spoilers. So yes, yeah. And if you like the book club, this show, or any of the other shows on the Doof Network, and you want to support them, consider donating to our Patreon at patreon.com/doofmedia. Supporting us on Patreon at the $20 per month level gets you the power to force me and Scott to watch a movie or short story of your choice and do an episode of it about it on our other podcast, the Doofcast. Mm-hmm. And of course, if you're not up for $20, there are lower levels which will all let you attend our Discord chat and vote in our quarterly fan art and occasional costume contests. And as always, while you're over there on Patreon, make sure you go to patreon.com/wildbow as well and donate to him, because this is his world and we're just playing in it.
Yeah, and we mentioned last week that we were really close to our next Patreon goal, and I just looked at it and we hit it. So thank you to everyone who made that happen. So we're going to be making an announcement on Patreon as far as what that show that we mentioned on there is going to look like. It's a video game focused thing that Elliot is working on, and I think we're very excited for it here in the Doof squad. So thank you to everyone that supports us, especially
Bidoofs, Colin W., Doof Dancers, Taliba, and Nick L., Doof Trooper, a bird, not a random bird, a very particular bird,
a very specific bird,
and Doof Warrior Josh. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for upgrading. Those of you who upgraded, we really appreciate it.
We do. You guys are incredible. I think, yeah. So at our $20 level, we're doing a new thing. Matt, you want to talk about that?
Sure.
We're doing a thing called the Council of Doof. Basically, we wanted something for those patrons that are pledging to us at the $20 level continuously, month to month, instead of just once to get their reward. We wanted to give them something back in order to thank them for continually pledging at that amount. So we are starting a new thing called the Council of Doof, which is basically just we're going to take another episode of Doofcast and let that group of people that pledge at that amount to collectively select a show for us. So they're going to get to nominate something. People can second other people's nominations, and then everyone's going to get to vote, and the movie with the most votes wins, and then we'll talk about it on a show. We're starting that next month. So if you are at that level right now, you should have gotten a Patreon message about it to tell you how it all works. But it's never been a better time to join that level, because not only do you get to pick something, but you also get to pick other things.
Yeah, I believe the voting for the next, not necessarily the next episode, but a upcoming Doofcast episode is already underway, and people are nominating, and it looks like it's going to be fun.
Yeah, I think this is something we've been wanting to do for a long time. We really felt like we wanted to give back to the people that stay at that level after we've done their show, and I think it was a cool idea we've come up with to do that, and I hope those of you at that level really enjoy it. It's gonna be a lot of fun. Like the patron produced episodes, Matt, are some of the most fun I have because like it's stuff I never would have watched
Yeah.
a lot of times. And
Yeah.
I don't know. I really like it.
Me too.
All right. That's enough of that. After saying all those nice things about the people that donate, let's say some nice things about all you out there that just listen to us because we like you a whole lot too. You can help us out by downloading this episode, which presumably you've already done that.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. But you can also share it with people you know. I know this book is coming to an end, but I think there's a lot of people out there that have been like waiting for War to end before they really start reading it because they don't want to read it serially. And maybe while they're starting up, you can be like, hey, here's a podcast to listen to while you're doing that. It's really long, but it's good. So you can share it, or you can leave us rating and reviews on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher. So thank you to all those who do that and who have done that in the past. We appreciate you. We don't really advertise that much. We're trying to do some advertising, but we don't really do it that much. So we rely on you guys a lot, and you have not let us down. So thank you so much.
Yeah, we really appreciate that too. Well, that's all we've got for you this week. Next week, do we begin the final arc? We'll see.
Chris?